This is John Doxey with the THD Oral History Project, sitting with Ed Handelman, artist, in his home, in his studio at home on Grant Avenue. What's the address?
1644.
1644 Grant, and the date is January 31st, 2022. Ed, let's start at the beginning. We're going to work our way toward your time in North Beach, but I think it's important that we get your backstory. So I believe you were born and raised in Omaha, right?
Omaha, Nebraska, yeah.
And what's the date of your birth?
July 10th, 1933.
Okay. You were telling us the names and ages of your brothers?
Yeah, my oldest brother was 9 years older than me, and my next brother is 4 years older than me. They're both deceased, and I don't know what else I can tell you about them. They're not active right now.
And your parents had both immigrated from Russia, is that correct?
Right. My parents are immigrants from Russia, and they met in Omaha.
Okay. And what year did your mother and father come to the U.S.?
Both came, my father came when he was 17. He was born in 1895, so that means he came here probably 1914, 15, something like that. And God only knows why he settled in Omaha. Did
it have something to do with programs that settled immigrants in different parts of the U.S.?
Yeah, I heard there was a program set up, a Jewish agency set up in New York, not wanting everybody to congregate. So they would go give people a ticket on a train and a name as a contact, if they didn't already have something like that. And that's how my father ended up in Omaha.
And he met your mother in Omaha?
Met my mother in Omaha. She'd come over, her father and older sister came over earlier, earned money to bring the rest of the family over.
And he would have left Russia, or both of them perhaps left Russia with their families, or in her case with her family?
My father came by himself.
But was this to escape anything that was happening in Russia, or was there a reason?
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you say that he had fought in
My father fought in World War I.
For the U.S. military after he came to the U.S. I see.
He came here just enough time for him to be old enough to be drafted. And he was actually wounded and gassed in World War I, which led to a deteriorating health, and he died relatively young.
And what was his, what sort of jobs did he do in the U.S.?
Like immigrants we see here, he had a corner grocery store.
Did you ever work at the corner grocery?
Did I ever work?
Did you and your brothers, or?
I'm sure my older brother probably did. My father died when I was 12, so I don't really, I wasn't up. I didn't want to work then.
Was he the owner of the grocery store?
Yeah, and he lost it all in the Depression.
And your mother, what happened to her?
She died when I was 2.
Oh.
Right, so I don't really know her. But according to my oldest brother, somewhere in the house we have a tape of my oldest brother talking about his life, and he referred to my mother as a martinet. I'm sort of glad I didn't run into that.
A drill sergeant. Yeah. And so after your father died, you were still only 12. Who raised you, or where did you go?
When I was about almost 5, I got a stepmother. It was really interesting because along with her came her sister and her father. So all of a sudden, we had a big family,
And after your father passed away, did you continue living with that family until you were 18 or so, something like that?
It was after when my oldest brother was married and had his own family, and my brother was 4 years older than me, got drafted and went to Korea, and it was me and my stepmother, and basically after I got out of high school, I went to work for the Union Pacific Railroad. So I was the breadwinner in the family. I come home and give her the check, and she'd give me $20.
That was a big employer in Omaha, right?
Yeah, it's headquarters of the Union Pacific. Yeah. So I worked in the yards.
What was the neighborhood you grew up like? Was it did it have a lot of Jewish immigrants, or was it a mixed neighborhood of different?
It's very mixed. It was black, a lot of black. It was I grew up in subsidized housing, what they call the projects, and it wasn't like the horror stories you read in some of them right now, but it was like there was a lot of kids, there was a lot of pecking orders, like. A lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of racism, So, basically you had to be tough.
What did you go to local schools, local public schools?
I went to, there was a school about 3 blocks from my house, but because it was overcrowded because of the projects, I continued going to school that was about 6 blocks from my house. And it was a good thing on one hand, but I was tight with a bunch of guys in the neighborhood, but a lot of kids didn't know me, right? So also made you tough.
And what were your interests? Did you play sports, things like that?
I played sports in high school. I wrestled and played football. And played, all the local, softball and, pickup basketball and run from the cops.
What were some of your other interests? Did you start getting interested in art at any point when you were young?
I used to draw a lot. I also I spent a lot of time building model airplanes. And if you look around here, you see all the airplane stuff I've got. I'm of the age when you heard an airplane going by, you run out of the house and looked at it.
It was still a novelty.
It's pretty much a novelty, yeah. You didn't contrails, you never saw anything like that.
During World War II, was there a lot of any military or aviation activity near Omaha that you would have seen?
Offutt Air Force Base was where General LeMay was holding court. My stepmother's sister who lived with us was basically a young woman. She was like 18, 19 years old. So she had a lot of soldier boyfriends, and I had bayonets and helmets and bullets that they gave me, and like a lot of kids, wow, it's war, had no idea what was going on.
You said you started doing model airplanes. Was that your first exposure to something more artistic, do you think? Something that you were doing creatively?
I did a lot of drawing with stick figures when I was a little kid. I'm sure everybody does. And then I got into drawing things. I forgot how old I was. Must have been about 10. And I started, maybe I'll do a comic book. So I started drawing things, and I used existing comics as my models. Like I had a guy who was going to be a boxer, like Joe Palooka, except he had black hair, and I think Joe Palooka's manager was a guy named Nobby Walsh, and I did some character to take off on him. That didn't go very far. I remember showing my brother a picture that I'd drawn of Joe Palooka, but I used an indelible pencil, which was very common in those days. And my brother looked at it and said, "Oh, you traced it, huh?" Because it looked like tracing paper. And it upset me so much I don't think I drove again for 4 or 5 years.
You had drawn it, and he thought you were
He thought I was
tracing.
tracing it, yeah.
So you were showing some early
Hey,
talent.
look at this, you know.
Was there anybody maybe in your community or at school
There was
who
a
was
guy
a
who lived-
mentor? Or
There was a guy who lived across the street from me who, you go over to his house and in his room had beautifully done model airplanes hanging from the walls, and he gave me a coloring book, one with the lines and everything that he watercolored. And it was so beautiful, I wish I still had it. And he went on to, work from some agency in Chicago, and I have no idea what happened to him,
was Chicago the nearest big city that had a pull on people from Omaha? People, maybe like if you wanted to go see art, would you have gone to a local museum or?
Yeah, there's
somewhere?
actually quite a good museum in Omaha. It's called Jocelyn Memorial Museum. And it's a lovely building. It was considered one time one of the most beautiful buildings in the United States.
Did you go there when you were young?
I went there a couple times, yeah. What really got me interested was I had a girlfriend who lived in Lincoln, and she took me to a gallery at the University of Lincoln, of Nebraska in Lincoln. And there was a show by 3 LA artists whose names I can't remember, and it sort of blew my mind. And I said, well, I didn't even know you could do something like this. And that got me interested. So funny thing, I went to the Jocelyn, I knew they gave classes there, and I went there in the evening when their class was in, and I walked in the room, and I'm this wild-looking 17-year-old, right? And everybody goes, I just barged in, right? And the guy said, can I help you? I said, yeah, I want to paint. He said, well, wait a minute, let's go out in the hall. So he went out in the hall and told me what I'd have to do,
What did he tell you?
He said, well, classes start at a certain time. If he was really good, he would have fit me right in, And, that basically was it until I got out of the Army.
I see. So, but did you, in the intervening years, say between your youthful sort of comic book drawing and then later becoming a full-time professional artist, I mean, through your Army years and so forth, were you continually drawing here and there, or was that an interest, or did you just put that aside?
I pretty much put it aside, yeah. What happened was when I got out of the Army, I was going to the University of Omaha, and a friend of mine was going to go to the engineering school at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. So it was a beautiful spring day. He said, well, let's go for a ride. Come on down with me. We'll go for a ride. I said, okay. So while he was being interviewed, I wandered around the building, and I went to the Department of Architecture, and I thought, wow, my upbringing, I had no idea that even people did things like this, right? So I said, yeah, maybe that's what I'll do. So that summer, I took a drawing course, and I just fell in love.
You would have been about how old at this time?
I would have been 21, maybe 22.
Well, I do. So when you were finishing up high school, did you have any sense of what you might like to do, or did you have a...
Not a lick. Not a lick.
What were other people from your cohort, other classmates? Were they going on to university, or...?
Yeah, most of them. Yeah. It's interesting, my two best friends in high school graduated 3rd and 7th in our graduating class. I'm not even going to tell you what my number was.
So academics was not your thing?
My first semester in high school I got all A's, and then I realized that to play any kind of sport, all I needed was a C average. And I said, oh, that'd be easy. And that's what I did. I maintained a C average all the way through high school.
Did you think perhaps that you'd do something in athletics as you finished
No,
high school?
I knew that wouldn't happen,
Or did you think maybe a job with the Union Pacific or something like that?
We used to joke about when you go to college, you didn't go to the Big Ten, you go to one of the Big Four, which is Armour, Swift, Cartagena, and Wilson.
Big companies in town.
Meatpacking.
Meatpacking companies. When you were growing up in Omaha, did you and your, either alone or maybe with your family, travel out of that area?
Never.
So you didn't have much exposure to life outside of Omaha?
Not at all.
Okay.
Oh, I did go do, my stepmother wanted to go visit her sister in Atlantic City and another sister in Washington, D.C., so I went to those two places. And we went by train, which was a really, even for a little kid, it was a drag. You know, I was 12. And, oh, geez.
By train from Omaha to the East Coast?
Are we there yet?
How many days did that take?
I know that we slept in the train, well, at least, slept in our seats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we were left off talking about you finishing up high school and not really having a plan. What happened next?
My stepmother decided at some point that she wanted to go live with her sister back east. Do I want to go with her? I said, no, I don't think so. I didn't really have much idea what I want to do, but a couple of my friends were going to go to the University of Nebraska, and they're going to join a fraternity there. So some of the guys in the fraternity talked to me, and they said, we'd like you to come because you're a wrestler. And
they thought you might fit in on the wrestling team at the University of Nebraska.
Right. And I have to tell you that my going to not being a good student in high school compounds itself when you try to be any kind of a student in college. And I just had a really hard time, and I just said, after one semester, I said, this is not for me.
So did you return to Omaha at that point? I
went back to Omaha. I was staying with my oldest brother, and I was going, I went from one kind of job to another kind of job, and I realized this wasn't going anywhere. And
what did you work in? Any of the meat packing plants?
I worked in the meat packing plant, and while I was there, a friend of mine said that he was going to a meeting, and the coach from Peru State Teachers College in Peru, Nebraska, was going to building a team. He had some money or something, was building a team.
A wrestling team?
No, a football team.
Ah.
So I actually played football in high school. So I said, yeah, I'll go to the meeting. So I went to the meeting, and I met the coach. The coach, his name was Coach Wheeler. And he said, oh, yeah. He said, did you just graduate? I said, no, I graduated a year ago. He said, oh, I saw you play against in a particular high school game. It was my last high school game, and I was really up for it. And they had a little thing in the paper every week called Star of the Week, and that was me, right? So he remembered that. So he said, yeah, come on down here. And I wasn't about to do it. So I was working at Cartagena meatpacking plant, and a foreman said something to me that I didn't like, and I told him, go fuck himself. And he said, you go fuck yourself, you're out of here. So I was leaving there, it was, around 11 o'clock in the morning. And I said, So I got down the road, I hitchhiked to Peru, which I don't even know where it is, close to Omaha. And at the time it was a town of maybe 1,400 people, and the college probably was going to have maybe 400 or 500 people. And I got down there and I worked out for 2 weeks. I got in really good shape, and the guys down there were really big because they were farm boys and they'd all eaten good through the Depression. And I realized there was no future for me there. And it was very, very interesting. He actually recruited, the only black guy there was a running back from a high school in Chicago. And actually that team went on to play in a bowl
Really?
called the Liberty Bowl,
That's a
which
pretty big,
was probably
pretty
some
big
other
deal.
name now. Yeah, it was good, very ambitious for them.
What was your position when you played football?
Yeah. I mainly played. It wasn't until my senior year that we got a really good coach, and I played only on defense.
Would you say that you had kind of a temper in those days? Were you?
No, I didn't have a temper, but I had an attitude. And, I mean, I didn't blow up, but I think the expression is one of my older brothers said when I was going to the Army. He said, remember this: don't give anybody any shit, don't take any shit. So that was the attitude I basically grew up with.
So what happened after the Peru experiment?
I came back, and I don't know what I did. I got some other job, construction, and I realized that it was not going well. So I stayed with my oldest brother. I said, I think I'll go in the Army. He said, it might not be a bad idea. So I went down to the draft board, and my age group, was like, I think I was just turned 19. He said, "Where are you?" I went to the draft board, and they said, "Well, it might be another year before you get drafted." I said, "I want to go right now. Can I go on the top of the list?" The guy said, "Go home and talk it over with your family." And I said, "Okay." So I came back the next day, and he put me on the top of the list. I don't know, a few days later, I was on a bus going toward Camp Chaffee, Arkansas.
Did he want you to take a day to think about it because there was a war going on at the time?
That's what he told me. He said, there's a war going on now. And I said, "No, I don't remember my exact words. I probably said, I don't mind killing somebody,
This was for the Army?
The Army, yeah. The Marines was 3 years. Navy was 4 years. If you enlisted in the Army, it was 3 years. I figured, 2 years would probably be plenty,
So you went to, the first stop was a boot camp in Arkansas, is that right?
Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. It's right outside of Fort Smith, Arkansas. I think it's called Fort Chaffee now, but I'm not sure about that. And it's really interesting. It's the first time I ever ran across Jim Crow. I was walking back to the bus depot with a black kid in my squad, and we got to the bus depot, and I opened the door, and he said, "I can't go in there." "What are you talking about?" He said, "I have to go around the back." It was a shock to me because I grew up, with really a mix of kids. We even had one Chinese kid in our neighborhood in those days.
In Omaha.
In Omaha.
So how long were you at the camp in Arkansas?
I think 16 weeks was at 4 months. And at one point, I realized, after seeing what happens when you're pulling targets, when it's your turn to be in the rifle range, watching bullets go through 2x4s, I thought, this might not be a good idea. So I I applied for OCS.
That's the officer training? Or?
Yeah. And they had a leadership school. I was trying to avoid, going into combat. And so I applied for the leadership school. I was in leadership school. One of the reasons I was able to do that, when you go in the Army, they give you a battery test called the Army General Development Test. And I found it real easy. I had a real high score. So I went there, and after, it was no fun. It started getting really heavy on it. So at one point, whoever was in charge, I remember, they said, "Anybody who wants to go on, now's the time to quit." And I raised my hand. I said, "I want to quit." Right. So I got put in a holding company, and then eventually I got shipped out to Korea, and I caught the tail end of the Korean War.
Now, weren't you in artillery?
Artillery. Yeah.
So at what point did you transition to an artillery group?
Camp Chaffee was an artillery school.
I see. The whole camp was oriented toward artillery.
Right.
And so, when you were heading toward Korea, was there a stop in San Francisco?
They gathered about soldiers at a place called Camp Stoneman. It's up somewhere near Martinez or something like that. And from there, we were there for a few days, and from there, we went by ferry boat to Fort Mason. And we got off the ferry boat, we walked through the warehouse, basically. We walked through the warehouse, and there was this group of ladies called Gray Ladies giving us donuts, coffee, going on to the troop ship. And
you got onto one of those enormous troop ships.
Enormous troop, 3,000 soldiers on there.
But how long were you in this gathering camp, this Stoneman camp?
We were given a pass. It had to be, in the Navy, they call it a Cinderella pass. You have to be back by midnight. In the Army, I never heard anything, just a pass, you know. So at midnight, before midnight, we were walking back, and I met a guy, having a good time together. He said, "God, this is fun, isn't it?"
This was in San Francisco.
In San Francisco.
So you had come down from Martinez or wherever that camp was located on the pass.
On a bus.
On a bus with a bunch of other guys from and you had a pass in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And this would have been what year?
50. So the Army 52 to 54. So it's probably maybe spring of 53.
And the war ended in 53, so couldn't have been too much.
In July, right? So I wasn't. I was there for maybe 3 months of the war.
And so tell me what San Francisco looked like at that time.
Well, Market Street looked like a sea of khaki. I mean, I don't know what the other streets look like. I hardly got off of Market Street.
Different services, Navy, Army, Marines.
Yeah, basically when you looked down the street, what you saw was a lot of military men and a lot of young women, right? Which was, welcome to San Francisco.
So you got friendly with a guy who was on leave with you, and what happened?
So he said, "You want to stay?" And I said, "Yeah, let's stay." Right? What can they do? Send us to Korea? And so we went and we got a hotel room. And we hung out for a couple of days, and we were wearing the same clothes for a couple of days. And we went back to the camp and we went into the supply room, and because all our stuff was gone, and the supply sergeant said, "Have you guys seen Sergeant so and so?" He said, "Go see him first, and then I'll give you your equipment back." So we went to see this guy, and it's a sergeant, and I can't remember the guy's name. His last name was Palace actually. And he went in there, and I heard him getting reamed out. I mean, really. I said, "Oh God, we're really in big trouble now." So he walked out. And I went in, the sergeant said, "What do you want?" I said, "We're supposed to see you." He said, "Come back after lunch." So we went back to the supply room, and the guy said at the supply room, "Did you see Sergeant? Both you guys see Sergeant so-and-so?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Okay, here's your stuff." And nothing came of it. The next day we got orders and we shipped out. That's when we went ferry boats to San Francisco.
Did San Francisco, though, your brief experience in San Francisco, albeit, leave any kind of impression on you?
I remember looking around and said, "God, this isn't Omaha." I mean, that's that was my impression of. I had an aunt who lived there. I went and visited her, and somewhere in the Richmond district. Just to say hello, and a couple of cousins I said hello to. And somebody said, "Oh, my uncle's got a bar on Fillmore Street, Hayden Fillmore Street. It's called the Big Glass." go there and see my uncle and say hello first. I went there, and it turned out to be a gay bar for black men. And I realized that right away that I didn't want to hang out here too long. Do you know about that place?
The Big Glass?
It's called the Big Glass. I might be mistaken, but it's been a long time.
I've never heard of it, but it's perhaps before my time.
The hay was a whole lot different in your time.
So tell me, I know that maybe Korea is a sensitive topic for you, but can you tell a little bit about your wartime experience in Korea?
I went from private to sergeant really fast. Then I went back. Then I went private, corporal, sergeant, corporal again.
What happened?
It was a series of things. And I had a battery commander who really liked me, right, for some reason, some guy from Texas. And when he left, the exec officer who didn't like me very much, since I was a sergeant, I had to be punished by the battalion rather than the company. So really, he put me up for court-martial. Then he went on vacation. Right.
Court-martial? That's
Yeah,
pretty serious.
Yeah.
For what
Well,
apparent offense?
That charge was, I was in charge of a group of guys, a jeep driver, a radio operator. I forget what the other guy was. And something happened to the jeep. So they said, the driver wasn't pulling proper maintenance on it. It's your fault. Everything goes up to, chain of command. So, the battery commander was gone. So the exec officer, who was a nice, friendly guy, so I said, "What do I do?" He said, "Well, you can take company punishment, or you can be court-martialed." I said, "What would you do?" He said, "I can't give you any advice." So I said, "What could happen to court-martial?" So he said, "I can't tell you what it is you get off or not." So I said, I was about ready to leave. I had maybe a few weeks or a month, I can't remember now. And so I said, "Well, I'll go for company punishment." So what they did, they busted me, and they assigned me. I couldn't stay there because I was a sergeant. So they assigned me to something called AFAC, Armed Forces Aid to Korea, which I was in charge of, like 20 or 30 Korean guys. We were about grading a road, and we go out there. They all sit down, and start smoking cigarettes, and they didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it, so I smoked a cigarette with them, and we just talk.
And they took one of your stripes.
Pardon me?
Did they take one of your stripes too? He knocked you down to corporal.
That's what the company punishment was.
Were you in Korea when the war ended?
Yeah.
So did your time in Korea include some time in the post-war period then?
Oh yeah, too much time.
Though I guess the war has officially never been over. But
it's a truce.
A truce, yeah.
Yeah, we're always on guard.
How did the war affect you?
The most affecting thing of the war to me was I never really gave it a lot of thought until much later on in my life. But what affected me was, as the truce settled in, Korean people who lived in the little villages started coming back to where the villages were and settling in. So there was a lot of theft going on. So for some reason, in our battery, the 2 truckloads of guys, down the road, I can't remember how far it was, and we went to this little village looking for contraband. And basically, I was watching, I stood back and watched what was going on. They're going like mobs, like all these soldiers are tearing these little houses apart, and I stepped away from it. I looked at one of the lieutenants in charge, and he was at a loss too. And I walked away from it.
These were locals coming back to their village that were, okay.
I mean, with no village there, they were building what they could with what.
The villages had been destroyed, is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. So anyway, I think of it now. I said that's when you became conscious. At that point, I must have been 20 at that time. I said, wow, this is a terrible thing that's going on. That's one aspect of war that really got to me.
I imagine as an artillery person, you fire your rounds and you don't directly see what happens on the other end.
That's what happened to me. I don't know, maybe it was 15 or 20 years ago. I all of a sudden I got PTSD, and because I realized, I was killing people and I didn't even see them. It's like paying your taxes and you're killing people too. But, I know that's a different thing. But, if I'd been in a firefight or something like that, it'd be the whole story. But I was.
It was a delayed reaction, and it took.
Oh, very much so. Yeah, I didn't think about it at all. I was more upset by this village getting demolished than anything else.
Had that been demolished by U.S. forces or
by guys I knew?
And did you stay in touch with anybody from your military days after you were discharged?
There was a famous cartoon from World War II. It's in front of an establishment. There's a guy with a broom and an apron and sweeping the sidewalk, and there's a guy standing there with a suit and a briefcase. And all of a sudden, the guy with the briefcase looks at the guy with the broom and said, "Sergeant Handelman." And I go look at him and said, "Private Burgraff." That actually happened to me here in San Francisco.
You ran into somebody just randomly.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I ran into, on my way to Europe, I ran into a guy who I had met on the troop ship. And I was on 42nd Street or something like that. And this guy comes bopping down the street. And I said, "Hey," and when I was on a troop ship, I was a witness to him having a fight with somebody. So that's how well I knew him, right? I saw it happen. I was a witness.
And you remembered him after all those years.
Yeah.
Did he remember you?
Pardon me?
Did he remember you?
Well, that's only maybe 4 years, just a few years. So.
I see. I mean, when you realized years later that you'd been affected emotionally by your experience in PTSD, did you, seek treatment or join any kind of support groups?
I went to the VA and I talked to a budding shrink, and we talked about a lot. And the best thing for me, about the same time I went back to Omaha and I was talking to my brother and my cousin, and they talked, we feel that bothers us a little bit.
Your brother who had served in Korea as well.
Yeah, my brother was a hero in Korea, a Silver Star. So so they sort of that helped me a lot.
They had similar experience of PTSD.
Yeah, and they'd had much heavier experience in Korea than I did. I remember telling the shrink, I said, my experience in combat was pretty lightweight. He said, "No experience in combat is lightweight."
Do you feel as though that experience has had any impact on you artistically? Does that, in other words, does that kind of come into play?
I drew more battle scenes with stick figures when I was a little kid than. I don't really know. I don't know whether. I'm sure it has something to do with me. So I'm sure it has. Like what I do and what I say and everything is not any different from what I do in the studio.
So. Are you okay with continuing for now, or do you want to continue? So let's talk about what happened after. So you were, I think you said, discharged in '54 from the Army.
Yeah.
And you came back to the U.S. and what did you do?
I came back. I went to Omaha. I wanted to be. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew I wanted to be something other than working at the Cudahy's or the Union Pacific. So I went to the University of Omaha, and I was a very good student, as a matter of fact. I made the dean's list the 3 semesters I was there, and
that's interesting. It seems as though maybe some maturity or focus had set in these years.
I think in some countries, some European countries, I think Germany, I heard that they have what's called a wander year. You get out of high school, you go do whatever you want for
a gap year. Sometimes people call it, yeah.
And these were my gap years, right? And yeah, I became more mature. I realized a lot of things. One of the things that happened to me at the University of Omaha, I took Introduction to Humanities, something that was not part of my life at all. Humanities, art and literature. I read some books. Usually someone said, "Hey, read this book." I said, "Okay." When I was in high school, instead of reading assigned books, I went to the library and read science fiction stories, Jules Verne. It's the only one I can think of right now. So I got, all of a sudden I'm in a class. There's a guy giving a lecture, he's talking about art and painting and architecture. Wow. It's mind expanding. It's like dropping acid without dropping acid.
I don't want to, draw or connections where they may not exist, but is this sort of the beginnings of an artistic awakening in you? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, actually, I realized that this is what I want to do. So they had an interesting art department at the University of Omaha. They had a woman who was the head of it. She had a doctorate in the psychology of color. They had 2 full-time instructors and a couple of part-time instructors. That's how big the department was. But she, Dr. Koch, had studied with people from the Bauhaus. So the education there was really interesting. We did things. You go into a drawing class, and all of a sudden you're doing etchings and stuff, and you go into a design class, and you're working colored lights and everything. And from there, I went to the Art Institute here. It was completely different. I realized I was getting a really good art education at the University of Omaha. And over here, I was getting studio time, basically, which was cool, this way. But
as an artist, I think you have described yourself as a colorist.
I'm a colorist.
Was it working with this woman that was her specialty that brought that into your consciousness more? Or?
Well, for example, if you mix all the colors together, you get black or dark brown. You mix all the light colors together, you get white. Wow, who knew that? So yeah, I learned a lot. Yeah.
You carried that with you as your years went on. Okay, so you were for how long at the University of Omaha?
3 semesters.
And then what happened?
Came to the Art Institute of San Francisco.
Had you finished whatever program you were doing?
No.
No. But
I'm a classic dropout.
So what propelled you to come to San Francisco at that point?
Omaha.
Okay, so but there was something about San Francisco, I guess, that attracted you.
Well, I remembered when the brief time I was here that I liked what I saw, And actually, when I was leaving, when I decided to leave, I was going to go to Portland because the wife of one of my teachers at Omaha U had gone to Reed. She said, Reed might be a good place for you. So I was driving, I said, well, I'm going to go to Reed, and then I'll come back and check San Francisco out. And so I got on the road, and my girlfriend at the time, I dropped her off at her grandparents' house in Colorado. Can't remember the name of the town. And then I was driving, I said, see, I go this road, I go to Portland, I go this way. I said, no, I don't need to go to Portland, I want to go to San Francisco. One of the things that turned me on to San Francisco, I picked up a brochure at a Ford dealership, had illustrations in it by David Park, famous San Francisco artist. And I said, wow, this is really nice stuff, you know. And that's what propelled me to San Francisco.
Okay, we had a small pause while the telephone call came in. We were talking about what drew you to San Francisco.
Yeah, Stephen David Park's illustrations in a brochure for Ford cars. And really, they're really quite beautiful. You know, he's a wonderful painter. And I said, well, I'll go there. You know.
He was part of a school of artists, right, that was based out of the Art Institute? And
yeah,
was Diebenkorn part of that group?
Diebenkorn and I can't remember. And actually, when I got to the my favorite thing at Art Institute was a welding class, and there was an artist named Tom Hardy, and he's a really good teacher. I watched him walk around, pick scraps up off the floor, and go over and weld them and make this beautiful piece of work, right? And yeah, it was my favorite class.
Was the Art Institute in its current location, or was it at
current location
on Chestnut Street?
Yeah.
And so at this time, so I guess maybe just talk me through your how you approached San Francisco. When you arrived, where did you stay? Where did you live?
I actually I went out to my aunt's house, and she said, "Well, you can stay here." I said, "No, I'll go downtown and stay at a hotel." My first mistake, right? So I went down. I stayed at a hotel that's at Fifth and Mission. I forget what it's called. And I made the mistake of parking my car on the street. So I went out in the morning, and there was a broken window in my car, and everything except what I was wearing was gone. So I said, I took it well. I said, well, new beginnings, you know. I'm going to have to buy new clothes and everything else. And so, yeah. So that day I went and registered at the Art Institute, and there was a little notice on the board. And this has to do with Telegraph Hill, I think, because where I stayed is at the foot of Telegraph Hill.
That was your first place that you spent a significant amount of time after this initial hotel on Fifth Street.
Yeah, I only stayed there for one night.
I see.
Yeah. And it's what's called now the Coppola Building. And I forget what it called. I think it was called the Columbus Tower Building in those days. I'm not sure. But there was a little notice at the Art Institute that said rooms for rent. So I went there, and there was a woman who ran it. I don't remember whether she had just part of the building. I think she maybe had a couple of floors. And she was a pastel artist. She did beautiful, intricate stuff, you know. And there was a guy, the handyman, looked, you know, he wore his hat. We were obviously some painter, right? And I rented a space there, and I stayed there for a while. Yeah.
And what sort of a place was it?
A room?
A studio apartment, kind of? Or?
No, it was a room, and there was a bath down the hall. And
with other students or artists?
I have no idea. I met one guy when I first moved in there because he was at the same time looking for a place. And I didn't see him again until 20-some years later. Right, when I went to work, and he was working the same place that I worked at.
Well, speaking of work, I assume you needed to have income. That was probably one of the things you did fairly quickly, right?
Yeah, I had the GI Bill. I had some money that I'd saved. And one of my cousins worked for a furniture store on Fillmore called Boxers. I think it was a Fillmore and Mount Ellis, something like that. You know, familiar with that?
I don't know Boxers. I know that neighborhood very well.
So what I worked on a truck delivering sometimes, and I worked in their warehouse repacking dishes. The warehouse was on Golden Gate Avenue, right off of Fillmore. So yeah, and as I say, I didn't really like the Art Institute that much.
About how long did you stay attending classes at the Art Institute?
For a semester.
For a semester,
Yeah.
okay.
So
And this would have been what year?
56.
56?
Yeah, 56. The fall of 56, I went there. Yeah. Someone said, well, why didn't you like it? And I said, well, I thought about it a lot afterwards. Like, I found it very cliquish. And that's probably common for art schools, you know, where you gravitate to a certain teacher. And I've never been that kind of person, you know. So, you know.
Were the other students or the community there at Art Institute welcoming to you when you arrived?
Yeah, in some funny ways. Right? They had some kind of a mixer, so I went to this mixer, and this one guy glommed onto me, and we talked and this and that. You know, he's a nice man, you know. And he said, "Well, let's go have a drink." So we went to what's the place down there? The Irish coffee place down there.
Oh yes.
Having a senior moment here.
Me too. I know the place you're thinking of.
Yeah, anyway.
Where the Irish coffee was supposedly invented, yes.
Anyway, you know, we're there, we're hitting on a couple of young women, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then he and I left, and all of a sudden I realized, this is a homosexual. So that's how I was welcomed to it. And I said, oh.
So what was the, you were living in North Beach and working outside North Beach, but you were going to the Art Institute, and your life, much of it seemed to be focused in North Beach. What was it like in this neighborhood at that time?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you, I had a girlfriend who was going to the Art Institute. She was an airline stewardess, and she had her schedule fixed a certain way that she had a lot of time off. She did one flight a week to Sun Valley, and one flight a week to Hawaii. And I think I was her San Francisco boyfriend. So that was one of the good spots I liked her. She and I became cliquish. What was North Beach like? I don't know. I didn't really get into a lot. You know, I went. You know, I've never been much of a drinker, so I didn't go into bars or anything like that, and I didn't really get to know North Beach much at all.
Did you end up living in other places in the neighborhood? I think you mentioned Vandewater Street, for example.
Yeah, that's way afterward. I did have, while I was at the Art Institute, a few of us decided to open a gallery, right? So down here on Filbert and Powell, there's a series of little storefronts. So we rented one of those storefronts there and opened a gallery. It didn't amount to much, right? But for a while, you know, when you open the door and go in the building, there's a little overhang up. I lived there for a while, unbeknownst to most people. You know, there was no facility there. You know, I'd get up in the morning and go find some place, you know.
Did you have a place where you did art, painting?
Just at school.
Okay, but
Yeah.
after you were there for one semester at the school, and then what did you do?
I realized I had the GI Bill. I could be going anywhere. I decided to I'll go to Europe.
So after a semester at Art Institute, you went to Europe.
Yeah.
Okay, where did you go in Europe?
I was going to go to school in Germany because I had a little bit of German high school. So I went to university in Hamburg, right? And I'm talking to some guy, and he's telling me what I have to do, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the conversation, he starts speaking to me in German. I said, wait a minute, you have to slow down. He said, no. He said, you're in Germany now? You're going to go to school here? You can speak German. I said, no, fuck this. And I had been in Italy, and the zeitgeist in Germany and the zeitgeist in Italy is really different. So I said, well, I'm going to go to Italy.
Where in Italy did you go?
I went to Florence, University of Florence.
And so did you attend any kind of a school there? What did you do in Florence?
I painted.
You painted?
But not at the school. The way the system there is that you don't have to go to class, you don't have to do anything, you only have to take exams, right? So I said, oh, that's perfect, right? So once a month I would go to the concierge, one of the buildings, and give him my GI Bill thing, and he'd go get it signed and give him back. I'd give him a couple hundred lira, so that way I keep getting my checks. There were about a dozen, 15 guys I knew who were doing that.
Former people on the GI Bill?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, but was this a school or a
University of Florence?
I see. And so, I mean, did you have instruction in painting and drawing and things?
No, they didn't have. I was studied in. I was in the Studio dell'Arte, study of art history, and I went to one class one time because a woman I know was like, "Oh, come on, this class," and the guy, he's up there, he's got the book he's writing on art, and he's going. I'm going. So I didn't have to go to classes. So it was like, I painted every day. I get up every day and paint till maybe 3 o'clock or something like that.
And what sort of things were you painting at that time?
I was pretty much abstract stuff, yeah. It was the times, 50s. Yeah. And yeah, that's pretty much what I was painting.
And so how long did you stay there in Florence?
I got there in the spring of '57, and I came back I was back in San Francisco the fall of '59. So it's basically almost 2.5 years.
And you decided when you left there that you would return to San Francisco?
Yeah. I stopped in Omaha, for a while, and I have to tell you, I had an experience in Omaha that got me out of there real quick. And one of it was Friday night. I'm with a couple of my buddies. We're going go hang out at some bars, something like that. And there's a bar in a mall, right? So one of the guys said, "Hey, so and so and so and so." A couple of girls who we knew were working up there. So we went up and said, "Hey, come and join us." And one of them said, "Well, I have a date," but the other one said, "Well, come with us." So there's 3 guys and this girl. So we were having a good time. I'm the first person they dropped off. I'm staying at my brother's house. And my brother and my sister, I get up early and they go shopping. And while they're shopping, they meet this girl's aunt there. This is really fast, right? And she said, "Oh, I hear your brother had a date with my niece last night." My brother came home and told me, I said, "Man, you can't do anything in this town, right?" I mean, I didn't have a date with her. She's part of the group, right? So that's one of the things that prompted me. And also, I woke up, that was in the back of my head, that I don't want to be around like that. I woke up one day, it was hot and humid. And I said, I'm not going to spend another day here.
So the more big city vibe, as well as perhaps the climate in San Francisco, were appealing. appealing, among the other appealing factors?
All I know is when I came to San Francisco, it was August, and I got out of the car, and I'm wearing a short sleeve shirt, and I go, oh, God, this is wonderful.
So you returned to San Francisco in 1959, and where did you land?
I stayed, the first place I stayed is Entella Hotel. It's on Columbus and Lombard. And a friend of mine had a girlfriend who had a place down here above the ravioli factory, Cavarata.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, she was going to leave, so I got that place. And it was one big room, probably maybe as wide as this. Not really big. It was, but it was, had a bed in it. It's a little single bed. It had a sink. Must have had some kind of stove because I used to cook rabbit skin clue, and you know what that is?
Rabbit skin?
Rabbit skin clue.
I've never heard of that.
When you do a canvas, you prime it, right, with rabbit skin glue, and people don't do that much anymore.
I
right?
see. So it's okay.
So yeah, I had that place until I met the woman who became my first wife, and she and I moved to Vandewater.
What is her name?
Her name was Joni Lindy.
Joni Lindy.
Yeah.
Where was she from?
She was from San Rafael.
Oh, a local.
Yeah.
Is she still alive?
No, she's not. She died several years ago.
And at this time, were you painting full time?
Yeah. That place was perfect.
You had really dedicated yourself then to painting.
It's a disease.
Nice disease.
Yeah.
And, I don't want to interrupt. Go on.
Oh, no. So, anyway, I kept that for a while as a studio, and we lived in Vandewater, and we sort of, my daughter was born, we were living on, it's really interesting. When I go around, when I first met Peggy, my wife now, I said, oh, I used to live there. Oh, I used to live there. I used to live there. So we moved from there to Powell and Chestnut. Then we moved from there to Kearney between Green and Vallejo. Then we moved from there to Montgomery between Green and Vallejo. Then we moved out of the city we moved to the Haight for a while. And that was not so good because the guy who was a roommate of ours killed himself in there, so it just became uncomfortable. So when we moved back we're living on Vallejo, just up from Grand Avenue. So I've lived in a lot of places. And,
was your wife an artist as well?
No.
Did she have a interest in art? Or?
Oh, yeah. And she told me, she said, I always wanted to marry an artist, right? So, she's an interesting woman. She's one of those people who took Latin in high school and could speak it. And so any language that comes along, she just picked it up like nothing. Right? She graduated high school when she was like 16, and she was sort of attracted by what was left of the beatnik culture. See, I'm too young to be a beatnik and too old to be a hippie. So, I would have been, fit right in either way.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to, getting back to my questions about what the neighborhood was like. I mean, in the late 50s, were there still places where beatniks were hanging out?
Yeah, right over in the corner here was a bread and wine mission. You familiar with that?
On the corner of Grant?
Grant, the corner over there. It was run by a guy named Pierre Delattre. And, it was like, you could crash there. And it's sort of...
What was it called?
Bread and Wine Mission. And the closest I ever got to when he left and this place was closed down, there was another guy named, God, I should know his name because he was a Unitarian minister. Jack Matlaga is his name. And he married me and Joni, my first wife. I remember when he said, you want anything special at your wedding? I said, yeah, how about the recitation of the Charge of the Light Brigade? Which I thought was funny, and Joni didn't think it was very funny. You know.
So that's what was recited?
No, it wasn't.
So you moved around. It sounds like aside from the time in the Haight, and then did you say you left the city at some time?
Left the city in I guess it was 68 or 69. Moved to Tam Valley. Yeah, I kept working here in the city. You know, I still registered to vote in the city. And Tam Valley, we one day I got out and walked out. I sat in the front stoop and the car pulled up. A bunch of people got out and I said, they started walking up. Can I help you? They said, we come to see the house. I said, what? Yeah, it's for sale. I said, the landlord never told me, right? So we figured, well, probably a good time to move. So we bought a house in Sebastopol. And even in Omaha, I lived in a neighborhood like this. There were a lot of people, a lot of stores, and you know, everything like that. So all of a sudden, we're on the outskirts of Sebastopol. There was a well, you know, pump water into the house, and I'm going, God damn, I just hate it. So anyway, it ended the marriage. And I came back to the city, and trying to remember where I moved. Oh, I had a studio in the city, South Market, so I was staying there for a while. And then I ran into a woman.
This is the art studio?
Yeah.
And you lived there as well?
Yeah. Not the most comfortable living, but so I ran into a woman I'd known for a while, and she said, I got a room for rent, and I'll trade you. You can move in, but you have to do some maintenance around the house. Okay, I'll do that. So I did that I stayed there for about, I don't know how long. I can't really remember how long. But meanwhile, I'd gone to visit my daughter and my ex-wife in Sebastopol, and I ended up bringing my daughter back with me. And she and I lived in Bernal Heights for a while. Then we moved to the city. We were living in a place. A friend of mine had a place on the corner of Green and Kearney, and so we stayed there for a while. And then I heard about this place. A guy who had worked at a spaghetti factory was living here, and he was a heavy alcoholic. And he moved in with a woman who was living there, and she moved out. I mean, that's how bad it was to her. So I came down here. I heard about her moving, him being here. So I came down and knocked the door. He said, "Oh, hey, Ed, what's happened?" I said, "I'm moving in here." He said, "Oh, okay." He said, "This is who you know, it's real." He said, "Here's who you go see." There's a woman in Chinatown. I went and saw her, and I told her I was moving in. She said, "Okay."
Did your daughter come with you as well?
Yeah. So we moved in there, you know, we didn't have anything, no furniture or anything. Sort of pieced things together.
This was around what year? In the early 70s?
She was born in 62. Must have been around 1970, 71, something like that.
And you've been here ever since?
Yeah, I've been here since 1970.
In this same apartment?
It's the same apartment.
It's a great apartment.
It's a great apartment. The landlord was in a building down the alley.
So it seems as though North Beach, you tried some different places. You even left the city altogether on a couple times. But North Beach was a real attraction for you.
It's a wonderful neighborhood. It's a wonderful neighborhood. I hardly ever came up this street until I moved into it because, I was just centered about what I knew, right? And I think maybe I walked up there once or twice. Someday I sort of explored the neighborhood, and that's it.
And has this been the studio we're sitting in now? Has this been your studio ever since then?
No, I had a studio in Hunters Point Shipyard for a while, where Peggy has a studio. This is her last day there. Yeah. Oh no, I'm trying to remember. Well, I was still married to Joni. I had a studio south of Market, a little street called Zoe Street, between 3rd and 4th, Brannan and something else. And I got that through another guy who worked at the spaghetti factory, and he was giving it up. So I got it, and what it was, I rented the whole basement of this place. The basement, the window, street level was right about eye level, right? So, it had good light and everything. And I rented the studios to other artists, and I had a free space and $40 a month. And I kept that until the building changed, and the guy told me, he said, "Oh, I'm tripling your rent." And so I decided to give it up.
This was the one on Zoe Street.
Zoe Street, yeah. The last time I looked at that, which was years ago, and it turned into a boutique. That's how the neighborhood changed down there.
So let's talk. You've referenced a couple of times the old spaghetti factory. Around what time, what year was it that you worked at the old spaghetti factory?
Let's see, I worked 60, early 60s, maybe 62 or 3 until maybe 70.
So you had a good run there of 7. So you were there, it sounds like 7 or 8 years.
It was a great place to work.
Did you work there steadily that whole time?
Yeah.
And what was it that, how did you find, tell me how you found that job.
My first wife was a cocktail waitress in the flamenco show there. You familiar with the flamenco?
I've heard about it.
She was a cocktail waitress there. She'd take flamenco lessons and stuff like that. So I was driving a cab previous to that. I always look for jobs. That I always look for jobs where I'd have time in the evenings for myself. I worked at Bemis Bag, used to be a factory over on the other side of Trailer Field. And I drove a cab. I ran a coffee shop down on Post Street. That's where I met Sergeant Handelman, met Private Burgraff.
Was this, is that because you do your best painting work in the evenings?
No, I wanted daytime free.
I see. You wanted jobs that you could do in the evenings after you had spent the day painting.
I want to get up in the morning and be bright and well rested and go to my studio. I don't mind slogging around work. Anyway, the spaghetti factory was quite a good place to work.
And did you got that job because your first wife was
anyway?
Was there?
I've been driving a car and driving a cab, and it was starting to get to me a little bit, And I was sitting at the bar, and I said, "Hey, I need a job." And they said, "We need a dishwasher." And I said, "I could do that." So a dishwasher, maybe 4 or 5 days later, I was second cook and then first cook. Just very little cooking involved, I have to tell you that.
So what are some of the things that you used to cook?
We didn't cook anything. The way they operated there was that we made the spaghetti fresh. Some guy would come in during the day and cook all the sauces, and we just put things together.
The spaghetti, the noodles were actually made on site?
Noodles. Well, they came in boxes, you know, big box. Did I knock that off?
No, you're okay.
So,
Okay, and so then your job then was what? Assembling things, sort of
yeah,
putting the
you know, like
sauces
as
in.
the first cook, the waiters come up and put their bills down there, and I look at it, I said, oh, I say, give me 10. The guy would get 10 plates, and I would do the sauces and put them there and cut the garlic bread. And you know, you got the system. It became like a dance almost. You do this, you know, you would move this way. And time went by very fast, and there was always a lot of laughs.
Around what time of day would you start working there?
4 o'clock.
And you'd go until about when?
Till midnight.
Till midnight.
Yeah.
Is that when it closed at midnight?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was. I'd like to hear some of the other people who worked there and the clientele. What was it like?
We one time we were figuring out years of college in the kitchen. Right. We had guys. One guy had master's degree. You know, but most of them graduated from the Art Institute. One guy who worked there was his name is Dave Getz. He was a drummer for Big Brother and the Holding Company. So when they were first coming, they were meeting at the Spaghetti Factory, the little group of guys, Janis Joplin and company. Yeah. And yeah, we had a softball team, a co-ed softball team. We played against the Art Institute, and there used to be a restaurant just down the street from the Trieste, right on that corner. There was called, I forget what it was, MDR, Minimum Daily Requirement or something like that. It had that kind of name, and I forgot who else we used to play.
But it sounds like there were quite a few artistic people who worked there. Is that right?
Freddie Koo, the owner, used to talk about, he said, I put dozens of people through the Art Institute. Well, you know, it's not quite, but a lot of people, yeah.
And did describe? Can you tell me what the interior of the Spaghetti Factory looked like?
Yeah,
I've heard there were chairs on the walls and things like that.
There were open rafters and chairs hanging from the rafters. And Freddie Koo is the kind of guy who would go to an auction and he'd buy stuff that no one else would buy. On the second floor of the Spaghetti Factory, it was jammed with stuff. Just jammed with stuff. I remember every time I had to go to use the elevator to go up, there's a Madonna, statue of Madonna looking down the elevator shaft, you know, and you go, you know, first thing you go, when he lived on the third floor. When he was moving from there, he showed me, he said, oh, I just uncovered this letter. It was a letter with a 3-cent stamp on it. And been buried for all those years.
Wow.
In the place. So the Spaghetti Factory, you walk in, it had, everything was, nothing matched. One guy had worked there had covered all the tables with collage. And he did that same thing at Vesuvio's. They might still be there. Yeah, it was very interesting.
It was a good time, though. People that
Yeah,
clientele that came in.
You know, like there was a woman who used to come in there periodically, and she had a shopping bag full of peyote buttons that she would sell. And there was a guy who would come in every Friday night to sell lids, right? Mm-hmm. So am I giving something away that I smoke marijuana? So we buy a lid for the kitchen, you know. One time I came back in from out in the alley, the little alley there. I came in from the alley after and smoked a joint, and Blaine Ellis, who's married to Rita, right? had this one guy on the floor, he was choking him like that. I said, what the hell are you doing? He said, I'm going to kill this motherfucker, right? I said, if you kill him, you have to do all his work. He said, that's why I'm going to kill him. I'm doing all his work now. Yeah, I mean, things like that went on all the time.
So Blaine also worked at the spaghetti factory.
Blaine worked there, yeah.
Yeah. Did you make a lot of friends that you still... Because he's still one of your good friends, isn't he?
That's really interesting. Yeah. Peggy said, I go to places, people are talking about the spaghetti factory all the time. I said, yeah, I go places. Peggy did a lot of catering, and all your friends are caterers, right? I said, that's what happens.
There were, as I, did a little reading about the old spaghetti factory, some big names performed there. It said the Kingston Trio and Arlo Guthrie. I guess Cruz Luna was a flamenco dancer.
Yeah, Cruz Luna.
Robin Williams was there.
There was a room in the front called the Blue Noodle Room. It was run by Joan Reynolds, who was married to one of the Kingston Trio guy. His name, Mr. Reynolds, I think is one. Nick Reynolds. I don't really
When
know.
you were working there, though, did you see performances or kind of well-known performers or artists at the...
Let me tell you about the flamenco show a little bit.
Okay.
The headliner, the guy was a guy named Ernesto. And when troops came to town, they always hire some locals. And one troop came to town and they hired Ernesto. And Ernesto got the write-up in the paper because he's incredible. He's an incredible dancer. The word got out when troops came through, they never hire him again. But people would come from far and wide to, and there was a woman named Isamura, Myrna Williams, that's her name, right? Who was, first time I ever saw her, I almost fell in love with her. She was beautiful, and watching her dance was incredible.
Was there was a stage then?
Yes. There was the Blue Noodle Room, and the next was a small room that's not too big. Not too big. That's where they did the flamenco.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me a little bit about Freddie?
Freddie is he's this wonderful man. If he run into you at somewhere like at Vesuvius or something like that, he'd buy you a drink, but never at the spaghetti factory. Except I was driving a cab when my daughter was born, right? And I came home and the groceries are still sitting there. And I said, when I come home, I'm eat dinner and it's not ready. One beautiful thing about driving a cab, you go home for dinner if you wanted to. Yeah, I went upstairs and knocked on the guy's door and he said, oh, congratulations. I said, what? He said, your wife had a baby. You didn't know? I knew she was due. So anyway, after I saw her, I came back and went to the spaghetti factory because, and I was telling Freddie got me really drunk. Really drunk.
But Freddie was kind of a supporter or a patron of artistic people, is that right?
Well, he gave him work.
Gave him work.
Yeah.
And he owned the Savoy Tivoli as well?
Yeah.
And is that where you and Peggy met?
Yeah.
We're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but let's just, I guess, stay on the old spaghetti factory for a minute. And
okay, Freddie.
You stayed working there, you said, until about 1970 or so. What was it that caused you to leave at the end?
I wanted to make more money. Yeah, I wanted to make more money.
Yeah.
So I started off on doing handyman work on my own, and then I heard about this particular job that I got. It worked out really well. I did it for 30 years. Worked at setting up displays for trade shows. It was also a great job because you could work basically whenever you wanted to.
So you could do that in the evenings if you wanted to.
It was a union job, so like a hiring home. I'd pick up the phone, I dialed, remember that? I dialed the number and the tape would come on and said, so-and-so company needs 100 men on Wednesday, anyone with the seniority number of 1 to 50 call in now, and 50 to 100 call in later. And that's how you get your job, or not. Or not.
And you did that for 30 years?
Yeah, about 30 years.
Was that the sort of final paid job that you did?
Yeah.
Yeah. And when did you, and what year would you call yourself retired from the work life, from the paid work life? Or
Yeah.
what year did you?
I try to think about that. Like it's maybe 12 years ago, 10, 12, 15 years. I really don't remember. A lot of things I don't remember. But it paid very well. For that kind of work, it paid very well. When I quit, it was $38 an hour, which is for very little skilled labor. And now the guys are making close to $50 an hour.
What union is that?
It's called Sign, Display, and Allied Crafts. It started out with sign painters, window displays, Allied Crafts. That's what we were. And when I started doing that work, it was basically table shows where you set up tables and stuff like that, and the vendors would come in and you use the tables. Then it got very elaborate. I don't know whether you've ever been to one of those trade shows.
I don't think I have.
Yeah, but they, got to the point where some of the displays were two stories high with little theaters in them where 12, 15 people could watch them. Became a big deal. That's the Moscone Center. Started out at Brooks Hall, which is not much. Now Brooks Hall is used as a story library books.
Let's take a look at the photograph that you have of the crew from the old spaghetti factory.
Well,
This is a great photograph.
It's a great photograph. It was taken by Jerry Burchard.
If you can hold it up, we'll zoom in on it. Who some of the people are, or I think you're in there.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay.
That's my first wife.
Mm-hmm.
My daughter, Anna, over here.
Let's see. I'll have to move things around. All right.
Freddie Koo right here.
Let's see if I can zoom in on Freddie. Yeah. And what was the occasion that this photograph was?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I can tell you it was either a Saturday or Sunday because I only worked.
Because why?
I only worked during the daytime on a Saturday or Sunday,
I see.
which is also rare.
Uh-huh.
Because the day cook was off, so then you're going to have to do that. I can't cook. Fortunately, she could cook, so it worked out all right.
How many people how many cooks were there?
I mean, when I was working
When you were
in the
working
kitchen,
there, yeah.
let's see, there was in the kitchen, there was a dishwasher, first cook, second cook, guy worked in the salad room.
Is it safe to say that probably nobody went to the old spaghetti factory
For the cuisine.
for the food?
Let me tell you, it's not as good as you get at home and better than Chef Boyardee.
Didn't you tell me something that Freddie said, I think it was? The customer is always...
Oh, Freddie Koo said the customer is always wrong.
I'm sure there's all kinds of stories. Now you are working, I guess, would you say you work daily doing painting in your studio?
I managed to paint at various times. Sometimes late at night I get them paint. Sometimes I don't paint at all for 2 or 3 days. And there was a time when might do 3 paintings in one day. Now I take maybe 3 days to do one painting. And I don't work very big. I'm working small, 12 by 12, and a little bit more bigger than that, a little bit smaller than that.
I think at the end of our interview, we can maybe take a look at some of your works that you're doing these days. They're very nice, small works.
I don't mind people looking at my work. I like to show off. If I consider something bad, no one ever sees it. Other people might consider some of the stuff that I think is good bad, but I don't care about them.
Would you say that these days you're working in a certain style, a certain series of works, you might say?
Yeah, I'm doing a series which I sort of call my Platte Valley series. It's all like landscapes with big skies and not much going on the ground, like the area I grew up in.
In Nebraska.
In Nebraska, yeah.
Would that have been similar to the terrain that was surrounding Omaha?
Yeah, all the way to the Rockies.
And going back to our earlier conversation, you had been, I think, pretty heavily influenced by one of the teachers you had in Lincoln, right? Who was a colorist. Would you say that has continued to influence your work at all?
Actually, I was at the University of Omaha.
Omaha.
Which is part of the University of Nebraska system. And the art department was really small. And the head of the department was a woman who had a doctorate in the psychology of color. And she had studied with people who had studied at the Bauhaus. So the education there, as little as available, was very, very good. And I left there for greener pastures. I came to San Francisco to go to the Art Institute, which I didn't find, for me, as good as what I was getting at the University of Omaha.
And you had mentioned earlier that you found the Art Institute atmosphere to be kind of cliquish. Is that right?
Yeah, I suppose that's normal in an art institute. You know, you gravitate to a teacher because you like what they're saying and what they're doing, and that didn't happen for me.
Did you find that there were any maybe fellow students or any of the faculty staff who became influential for you at the Art Institute?
No, I can't think of any, but some of the people I knew there became quite well known in the art world.
Let's talk a little bit about, you moved around quite a lot. You described in our previous session, moving around San Francisco and other parts of the Bay Area like Sebastopol and Mill Valley. But then you returned, I think initially to the city. Your first stop was Bernal Heights, and then ultimately you and your daughter moved back to North Beach. And maybe we could talk a little bit more about what it was that drew you back to North Beach. What did you find appealing about this neighborhood?
It's a wonderful neighborhood. You know, if you live here in North Beach, you live in Telegraph Hill, which I suppose this is. You're within walking distance of, the Bay and downtown, Chinatown, Embarcadero. It's a wonderful place. I like to read. I'm within walking distance of 2 branch libraries, North Beach, Chinatown. And if I don't like the stacks of one, I go to the stacks in the other one. Yeah, it's great. And every now and then I walk to the Marina Branch Library. Good walk. And well, once a month, not recently, but once a month I go down to downtown library, the main library.
Can you say a little bit about what it was like to have raised your daughter in North Beach? About how old was she when you when the two of you moved into North
I'm
Beach?
trying to remember exactly how old she was. She was 7, 8, or 9, somewhere. I really can't remember. And it's interesting, when she was with me here, I was working at the spaghetti factory, and I'd go to work at 4 o'clock, and she would come to the spaghetti factory after school, some of her friends maybe, and they'd help the waiter set up the table and do little things and that. Then she would eat dinner, and then she would go out. And she had a key, she was called a latchkey child, right?
One of the original latchkey children.
One original latchkey child. I have to tell you, when we were living on the other side of the hill on Montgomery Street, and she hadn't been in school yet, I was working late at night. My wife at the time was working late at night. And we'd sleep late. She would get up on her own and get dressed and go around and meet her friends. She was probably 4 years old.
So she's always been it sounds like an independent person.
Very independent. When we were living here, she asked me one time how she could make some money. So I don't know, what can a little kid do? I said, you consider shining shoes? She said, I'll do that. So I'll show you this. I built her a shoebox.
Wow. Let's see if we
You
can
get the
get that
picture of that?
Yeah.
I built her a shoebox.
Yeah.
And,
that's nice.
still some of her stuff.
Where did she set up?
Well, she didn't. She seemed to acquire certain customers that she hit on every day. And there were guys who were drank in Mooney's, who used to be down here, and they wouldn't let her in there, but she'd go to the door and say, hey, is Richard in here? Yeah, here I am. Come on out here, Richard. You haven't met her yet, but you'll understand what.
She was a go-getter.
She's a go-getter, yeah.
And she was quite young at this time. Is that
9,
right?
maybe.
And so she would actually go to the places where she knew there were people who would be customers.
Yeah.
That's good. Was there kind of a community of parents? Were there other people you knew, peers, who were also raising young children at that time?
Oh yeah, she had some friends that I didn't know their parents at all, and she had a good friend of hers who was a child of my good friends, right? One of the kids who came from an Italian family remarked that coming to our house was like going to the museum because there were paintings on the wall. And they also said to her and her good friend Leslie that her parents seemed different than their parents.
Your daughter commented on that.
One of her friends commented on it, yeah. Like, they were all older Italian people, right? One of there's a guy in the neighborhood whose mother, still a good friend with him, whose mother was a waitress at, God, I can't think of. I have a senior moment. It's a Cafe Sport, which was on Columbus. And there were older white-haired Italian ladies, basically.
Would those, if you and your wife were sleeping in late or working late, were there people in the neighborhood, like perhaps these ladies, who could step in and provide a little child care or oversight?
Well, when my daughter was living here with me, I was no longer married to her mother. Her mother was living in Sebastopol, and so there weren't really any of those parents. But it was really interesting walking down the street with my daughter. She knew a lot of older people. I said, "How'd you know that?" She said, "Oh, I had dinner with them one time." And she has a lot of friends, and it's like I'm known in the neighborhood by most people as Anna's dad.
Anna, for our listeners, continues to live in the neighborhood and works at as a manager, I believe, at Sodini's.
She's at Sodini's.
What schools did Anna attend?
She wanted to go to school here in North Beach, what's the one up the hill. I can't even think of the name of it right now.
The one on Kearney,
Yeah.
on the steep block of Kearney.
Yeah, I can't think of the name. But she was being bused to somewhere in Hunters Point. And
At what level of school? Not elementary or middle school or
elementary. Then when she started middle school, she went to Francisco Middle School. And it was an interesting thing when she showed up for her class day picture. She came with her hair in pigtails, freckles on her face, and a couple of her teeth blacked out. And
what was she trying to accomplish? What was the image?
You'd have to ask her. Just be different, I guess. You know.
What sorts of changes? You mentioned how at that time there was still, or maybe even a little earlier, a pretty heavy Italian American presence. And what sort of you've been here now for more than 50 years in this apartment. What are some of the changes that you have observed?
Well, one good thing, there used to be on the corner here was a grocery store. I might have told you this before. An Italian man named Mike. I'd go up there and buy the paper or something like that, and I had long hair, and he sort of looked at me like, there goes the neighborhood, right? And after he retired, and I'd run into him on the street, he'd say to me, Ed, the neighborhood's going to hell. And I don't know who he meant by that, because I was already accepted by them. So, big changes, like there used to be also on the opposite corner up here was a laundromat. And before that had been a bread and wine mission, something set up during the beatnik period. And then it became the laundromat, and now it's some kind of offices. I don't know what they do there.
When you first came to San Francisco, you were coming in at sort of the later stages of the beatnik era. Did you observe some of that continuing on to influence North Beach?
Well, my wife at the time, who had been here before me, would say, "See that guy over there? Don't bother talking to him, right? Or see him? He might be someone good to know." And beatniks. I guess there were some people still hanging around who you would call beatniks, right? But Kerouac and well-known ones were gone. There was a guy around Hubert Green, he's known as Hube the Cube. And he was left over from that period. And he was an interesting guy. And he was a person who some medical people used him to experiment with drugs. And he seemed to be okay, right? Yeah.
Did you, you say that, you've been a big reader. Is City Lights part of your experience here, the bookstore?
Oh, yeah. I still buy books occasionally from City Lights, usually for someone else. I think I might have told you that when I first moved here, I stumbled upon City Lights, and I was reading their big magazine section, and I'm picking up a magazine folio almost, like it was called, I think it was called One, something like that. And I'm looking at it, all of a sudden I realized it was geared toward homosexuals. I went, closed it up, and I looked around. Is anybody looking at me? And that was my first experience at City Lights. I might have avoided it for months, but I don't really remember that.
But you returned.
Yeah, of course. And yeah.
Did you ever see, the hippie movement was, I guess, all over the city, but centralized in the Haight-Ashbury. How did that period of time?
Well, I think
what signs did you see in North Beach?
In North Beach, well, we moved to the Haight-Ashbury because it seemed kind of exciting, right? But no big deal, right? And North Beach, I can't really think of it as an area of hippies, right? But yeah, I guess maybe me and a lot of people I know might have fallen in that category. But I was, I was maybe 10 years older than most of the others.
What did you ever have? You had two older brothers. Did either of them ever come and visit you here in San Francisco?
Oh yeah, my oldest brother came. It was for it's interesting. It was for my 60th birthday, which we held at the Bayview Boat Club. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
And my brother was he said, wow, all those people, they're your friends, they all love you. Well, most of them I had never seen before in my life, but we had a band and, like everything. And, he had a good time. It was soon after his wife had died. So one of the things, he said, is when the mayor was the ex-police chief, I can't think of it.
Jordan.
So my daughter is riding somewhere with my brother, and she sees the mayor, and he yells out, "Hey, Mr. Mayor, here's my Uncle Phil from Omaha," and he waved at me. So it's a good story about my daughter. That's what she's like.
Did you I guess conversly, did you go back to Nebraska for any visits? And
I went
as you
back
got older?
for weddings and funerals.
Mm-hmm. And did you think about staying?
Oh, I did. I actually I had a show at the University of Nebraska, and I went back for that. It was really interesting. The opening night of the show in Lincoln at the University of Nebraska, there was a blizzard. So we drove from Omaha, and there was 2 carloads, some of my friends and my brothers and their wives, and we were the only people at the opening. So anyway,
because of the blizzard,
the guy who arranged the show for me at the University of Nebraska was like an assistant curator or something like that, and he told me later on, he said, I almost got fired because of your show. That's not saying a lot for what I showed there.
Was that show put on in part because you had the Nebraska roots?
No, he somebody, a friend of his, had a piece of mine, and he liked it, and so he wrote me and asked me some photographs. I sent him some photographs, and he said, "Oh yeah, we'll give you a show," and that was how it happened.
Let's talk about some of your shows. Where has your art been exhibited?
I started out showing in galleries in San Francisco. There was a gallery called the Hollis Gallery, no longer exists.
Where was that?
It was on Clay before they tore down and everything.
Where, in the Jackson Square area?
Yeah, somewhere down there, yeah. And then I showed at a gallery, I had a studio where Yerba Buena Park is right now. And the street that ran right through there, I had a studio there. So I went to, there was a gallery on Pacific and Victorian House. It was between Franklin and Goff, I believe. It was called the Arley Gallery. And I went there and, I talked to the guy, he said, I'm booked up for 6 or 7 months now, I don't know, blah, 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 I'll come by and look. So he was a guy who ran a gallery, but he wasn't an artist. He'd been a concert pianist. And so he brought one of the people from the gallery that he knew well, and they looked at my work and said, "Oh yeah, okay." So I had a show there within a month. The 6 months they were just to keep people at bay, and I showed there for a few years, and then he moved the gallery to Montgomery, and the building was called Japonesque. Now there's a little place. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I believe I've seen that.
Yeah, it's on Montgomery between Pacific and Jackson, I think. And then I sort of dropped out and didn't have a show for a really long time. And so the next show I had in a gallery was probably, God, I'm trying to think, maybe 30 years later. I was doing outdoor shows like in Washington Square, Union Square, Golden Gate Park.
That was an annual thing in Washington Square
weekly.
Park. Yeah, okay.
Weekly, different places weekly. And somebody from a gallery, it was on Sutter Street, and I can't even think of the name of it right now, and then came by and said, "We like your work, we'd like to have you show." So that was the first show I'd had in
Was that a solo show?
Yeah. Yeah, it was really, it filled up the gallery, right? And, it sold, I don't know how many pieces I sold out of, but the guy running the gallery said, "God, I thought this stuff would fly off the walls," and it didn't, so that was my last gallery show. And I have showed a few times at a local gallery called Live Worms Gallery, but that's usually 2 or 3 pieces at a time.
Live Worms on Grant.
On Grant, yeah. I actually I like to be in group shows rather than one-man show, because people like, I could.
Do you think that your current work, the Platte River, is it not Platte River, Platte
River Valley?
Platte River Valley.
Listen, there can't be any valleys in Nebraska.
Okay. Well, I know there's a river, so usually there's a valley. But do you anticipate that some of those will be shown publicly?
Oh, that's what I've been doing for the last few years.
But I noticed, because I attended your most recent show at the Live Worms Gallery, and the works that you had there, I think there were 3 of them, were older works that you said you had done maybe in the 1980s.
Oh, yeah. Those were similar to the things I was doing in the 60s. And I stopped doing those and was doing other kinds of things. And one day I went to someone's house who owned 3 or 4 of them. And I said, "Wow, these are really nice. I think I'll do some more of them," right? And the ones I subsequently did were much better. And those were the ones I showed mostly out of doors. Actually, when I first started doing the outdoor shows, I was doing still lives. I was doing like flowers and things like that.
Because that was
appealing to... I thought I could make some money that way. Mm-hmm. And then I started bringing some of the figures out, and they become very popular. And an artist friend of mine said, "Usually it takes 30 or 40 years before something happens," I said. So over the years I was doing that, I sold maybe 300 paintings. You think I'd be rich, but not for a lot of money.
Is there an artist community that you are part of that would be perhaps in this neighborhood or
down the hall?
Well, of course, we'll talk about Peggy in a moment, who's an artist, Peggy Huff. But I'm thinking about more broadly. You were at one time working at the Hunters Point
shipyard. Yeah, shipyard. But I'm not really a joiner. So when I first started showing outdoors, I joined a group called the Artists Guild of San Francisco. And I think that started out with a group called, I can't remember what they were doing, but they basically, San Francisco used to have an annual every year. And the first group that started showing outdoors were rejects from that annual. Right, and then split up and became the Artists Guild. And I used to walk through the Artists Guild shows and say, well, that's not bad, but that's terrible, you know. And I figured, well, okay, maybe I'll start doing this. And I did. And it worked out for me very well for a while. It was, I don't want to use the word lucrative, but it was, I would pass up, later on in the years when I was working at the union, I'd pass up union weekend hours where I made like time and a half because I was doing better on the weekends in the parks.
And you would do that at least maybe during the summer season, nearly every weekend. Is that right? Or
yeah. Well, most of the year when it wasn't raining. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Peggy. How did you meet Peggy? And let's say, when did you meet Peggy?
I met Peggy, I can't really tell you exactly when, but a mutual friend of ours was showing films at Savoy Tivoli. There used to be a bocce ball court in there. So she started showing films there. It was called the Bocce Cinema. And one night I was going to one of her filmings, and I met Peggy there.
She was also
she was
going to see the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have mutual friends who introduced you?
She was the woman who ran the show was the mutual friend. I think that she and Peggy might have shared a studio one time, but Peggy wasn't painting then. She was doing cloth art. And this other woman was doing quilts. So, yeah, a woman named Mary Lucas. It's interesting. I met Mary Lucas when I was in Italy, and I was there on the GI Bill, and she was there on a Smith Junior Year abroad. I can't say any more about Mary Lucas.
That's fine. So you and Peggy met, and a beautiful friendship was formed.
Beautiful friendship, still going on.
And can you say approximately what year that might have been?
I think I have to say it would be I can do it because I met her when her son was about 5, and he was born in 1970. So it's probably the mid-70s when I met her. And we joke about this sometimes because I can't remember exactly the day, what year I married her.
Where was she living at that time?
When I met her, she was living in San Anselmo. So I would bike over there.
Oh.
Yeah. Long ride.
That is a long ride. And eventually you got married, and she moved in here with you.
No, she at one point her ex-husband remarried, and her son, he wanted his son to come live with him. He was like 10 years old then, and she moved to the city, and we were courting, and then she moved in here.
And Peggy, for the record, is a painter.
Peggy's a wonderful painter, and she's a big influence on me. Yeah. I often walk by her when I go, oh, God, I wish I would have done that. Yeah.
And Peggy has recently given up her longtime studio at the Hunters Point.
Yeah, she got, it got to be like, a chore for her to, it's like minimum a half hour to drive. That's when, when there's no traffic at all, And, she's just going through withdrawal systems right now.
So you'll be sharing studios in the same
She has
place?
a room right next door here that
Yeah,
she uses.
that should be nice. We've covered a lot of ground. Would you say that, are there any, we've talked a lot about various turning points in your life when you encountered people who helped shape directions you would take. Are there other turning points, things that happen in your life that perhaps we haven't addressed? Maybe particularly in your San Francisco life?
I really don't know. You know, like when I went to the work, when I started doing union work, I met some people who have become really good friends of mine, and people I wouldn't have met otherwise. You know, I have a really good friend who's actually a wonderful person who is. To give you an example, his life was like I was at his mother's house one day with him, and he went out of the room for one reason or another. His mother said, you know, my son Eddie, his name is Eddie also, he can be in a room by himself and get in a fight, right? And he was a guy that, you know, got a general discharge from the military, which is not an honorable discharge. He did a little time for something he shouldn't have done, and he was actually president of my union for a while. And he's really quite a wonderful man. You know, people grow out of things, you know.
Is he somebody that you stay in touch with?
Yeah. Yeah, I might call him later on today, as a matter of fact.
And you stay in touch with Blaine, another alumnus of the Spaghetti Factory?
Yeah, he also, through my good offices, he worked in the union too. He joined the union, yeah. And there's a guy who lives around the corner who was one of my foremans while I was in the union. And he was a friend of my daughter's, right? And my daughter used to always take good care of my dad, right? So every now and then he'd say, Ed, I want you to go do this. Yeah.
Do you have at this point any plans or goals that you're working on?
Yeah, I'd like to live for about 20 more years, and I like to keep painting, and there's a couple of art pilgrimages that I like to do. I like to go to the Prado in Madrid, and I like to go to Tate in London. And most of the trips we've made, Peggy and I, have been to let's go see some art somewhere. We went to see the new Guggenheim in France. And it's a town in France you wouldn't go to otherwise. We've been to Florence a couple of times to see the art. One time, Peggy and I and her son, when flights were relatively cheap, we flew to LA, went to see a show. I can't think of the name of the artist. We flew to LA, went to see the show, went and had dinner, and flew back, same one day. Art pilgrimage. Yeah.
That makes sense. Two artists.
Oh, yeah.
Must be nice to have that shared passion.
It is. You know, people go to places like, oh, I understand there's great cuisine there. I go, well, what are the galleries like? Yeah.
Well, I think I want to thank you very much, Ed.
Oh, thank you.
It's been a real pleasure talking with you and getting to know you.
Thank you. Good to know you, and thanks for bringing up some memories.